My name is Janice Dole. I'm Professor of Education at the University of Utah. The value of teaching comprehension strategies, in my mind, consists of two things, basically. First, we know that when we teach comprehension strategies to students, our students become more independent learners. And that's really what we want them to be able to do as they get into later on in high school and in college. We want them to be able to learn independently without someone always being there. By using comprehension strategies, students can become more independent learners and more self-regulated as well. And that gives them really an empowerment to be able to learn on their own. It's simple. If students use comprehension strategies, especially when they get stuck, and if they know how to use the comprehension strategies appropriately, their comprehension is going to improve. And after all, in middle school and high school, that's what we want, is we want their comprehension to improve. Some teachers think, well, my students know how to read. I don't need to teach them comprehension strategies. I need to help them learn the content. And that's obviously a very valuable position to come from. But the truth is, even though your students may know how to read, they may not know how to read the very difficult texts that you're providing them. Textbooks at the middle and high school level and the different content areas now are really quite difficult, even for average readers to read. So it really will help your students to teach them how to use strategies when they come across, especially text that's very difficult. One study used a group of 7th graders, and they had 10 classrooms in which they presented students with strategies for comprehending paragraphs that they read. And the students were taught 3 basic strategies. Number 1, read the paragraph. Number 2, ask questions. And then number 3, paraphrase what you've read. When students were taught these strategies, they improved their comprehension over students who weren't taught the strategies. So that's a nice example of the kind of comprehension strategies that can be taught to students and that we know are effective. There are 2 comprehension strategies that seem to be the most powerful for students. One is summarizing. And many students do summarize, but it's a very, very difficult skill to learn. And very honestly, it's a very difficult skill to teach as well. But we know that it's one strategy that has a powerful effect on comprehension. The other strategy that's most effective is asking questions. Now, by asking questions, I don't mean that the teacher asks questions of the students. Rather, the students ask questions about the text itself. So students may be reading and they may stop and ask a question. Say, perhaps, what do the authors mean by the 3 branches of government? Or why are there 3 branches of government instead of 2 branches of government? Students asking themselves those kinds of questions seems to also have a powerful effect on comprehension. Now, there are 3 components in explicit or direct instruction. One is modeling and explanation. The second is guided practice with feedback. And the third is independent practice. Of those 3, the hardest for teachers to grasp, I think, and really work with is guided practice with feedback. Sometimes teachers model and then they provide an example of guided practice with feedback. They give students another example and they work with them to help them understand it, and then they move on to independent practice. But really, in truth, guided practice sometimes can take a great deal of time, and one example is not enough. Now, there are cases, for example, predicting what's going to happen in an upcoming text is something that students can do relatively easily and maybe with just one example of guided practice with feedback. When we're looking at teaching something like summarizing, however, the guided practice with feedback is going to look a lot different. Students need many, many different examples. They need examples working directly with the teacher. They may need examples that they practice in groups of 4 or 5 students. They may need examples that they practice with pairs of students. So the guided practice with feedback, that critical component of the explicit instruction model, really is something that teachers have to adapt flexibly depending on the comprehension strategies they're teaching. When teachers want to implement this practice, the first suggestion I would give them is to work with other teachers. I think there's real value in teachers collaborating together because there's more help in thinking about the difficult nature of comprehension strategy instruction and thinking about how to teach it explicitly. What I would suggest to teachers is that they collaborate together. You could have several teachers in different content areas work together as a team, or you could have several teachers in the same content area work together as a team. In that team, teachers can think about one or two comprehension strategies that the whole team may teach students. And so when students enter different subject areas in different classrooms, they're going to experience the same comprehension strategies used in science, used in social studies, used in English. So that's very, very powerful, and I think something that is very helpful for teachers. It's not something that I think a teacher can or should do by himself or herself. I just think it's too hard. A good principal or other instructional leader can really help schools implement comprehension strategy instruction at the middle and high school level. That instructional leader needs to be somebody who will provide teachers with the professional development that they're going to need in order to be able to implement this school-wide. And really that's where we're going. Having teachers work together in teams, having perhaps a coach or a reading specialist work directly with teachers, and having that kind of support from an instructional leader is really going to take comprehension strategy away from being something that's just written in a textbook now to something that actually is implemented with students in classrooms, in schools at the middle and high school level.